The San Antonio housing market is about to change forever. There are several huge Austin projects that have stalled or have been completely abandoned, and there is about to be over $8 billion worth of developments flooding into San Antonio. We're talking about some of the biggest projects the city has ever seen, and we're going to see buyers coming in from all over. I'm Michael McCall. I was born and raised right here in San Antonio and have lived here my entire life, and I've helped hundreds of families just like yours move here to the San Antonio area, and I'm getting this question all the time. Will housing prices explode in 2026, and what about 2030 and beyond? Well, let's find out. So first, let's talk about where San Antonio stands right now. Spoiler alert, we're growing pretty fast. In fact, San Antonio is expecting to add over 1 million people by 2040. 1 million, that's like half of Austin just coming to San Antonio, and most of them might be coming from Austin if you think about it. The growth is spreading to every part of our region. This includes some of the major suburbs like Bernie, New Braunfels, Bulverde, Cibolo, Schertz, Helotes, all types of places all around San Antonio. But here's the catch, there are still not enough homes. Builders are still struggling to catch up on the total amount of inventory that is needed for the amount of people that are moving here. And that has all just been since the COVID-19 pandemic and the supply chain shortages that all happened during that period. So as most of you know, San Antonio and the entire country has been kind of at a standstill as far as market increases, price increases since 2022 when the interest rates spiked. Well, as of June 2025, we've seen a median price point of around $324,000 in San Antonio, which is still the most affordable large metropolitan area in Texas, and that is actually a 4% increase from last year. So you can see we're starting to trend in a more stable, positive direction. And some of you might be thinking this is not really indicating any explosive growth by any means, but the positive growth is kind of reversing a trend that we saw for a couple years. We were a little down and then pretty much flat, and then now we've really started to pick back up and start to go in a positive direction again. Currently, we sit at about 6 months worth of inventory in San Antonio. So anything over 6 months is a classic buyer's market. And I would say we're right there on that cusp. And in a few more minutes, when I show you what could happen by 2030, you'll understand why timing on all of this stuff really matters quite a bit. But here's what worries me a little bit for those of you buyers that are waiting right now. Just a couple weeks ago, we had the interest rates plummet. They went from like 6.8 down to 6.2, 6.15% in a matter of like a week's time. And you can see how quickly this can turn in certain situations, right? So when those rates drop so dramatically, you have a lot of people, maybe it's you, that have been waiting and waiting and waiting because they cannot afford the house that they want because prices went up and interest rates went up at the same time. So this is our current situation. So what we're going to do is we're going to get into 5 huge factors that are boiling up underneath the surface that could drastically increase the prices in San Antonio in the very near future. But before I jump into those, if you're finding this insider look at San Antonio helpful in the slightest, I want you to hit that subscribe button. There are hundreds of you that are probably watching this video right now that are not subscribed. So I would love to change that, because what I'm about to tell you with these 5 factors could completely change what you're thinking about when it comes to timing your purchase in San Antonio. So number 1 is population growth. San Antonio is consistently one of the fastest growing metro areas in Texas and in the country. I mean, just in 2023, we added the most new residents out of any city in the entire country. I mean, we're seeing people coming from all over, whether it's just military PCS, San Antonio is Military City, USA, people coming from Austin who are trying to get out of that $500,000, $600,000 median price point that's up there and get into a pretty solid $250,000, $300,000 home here in San Antonio. Of course, this includes a lot of folks from California, from the Northeast, even people from Florida that are trying to get out of those really high insurance and high, risk areas for the hurricanes. The data is showing that very, very clearly. And although the pandemic was an outlier, these lower priced communities and lower priced areas like San Antonio are getting a lot more interest because it is a lot more difficult to afford a house these days. The second reason is our jobs and the economy. San Antonio is adding lots of big employers, and they are growing the ones that have been a significant player in San Antonio for years and years and years. We're talking Toyota, we're talking HEB, we're talking Navistar, USAA, all of them are expanding. Areas like Port San Antonio are becoming huge players for aerospace and engineering and software companies. San Antonio is on the brink of being one of the leading cybersecurity hubs in the country as well. And when you look at overall employment numbers, San Antonio's employment has grown by 2.3% year over year, which compared to Texas at only 1.5% and nationally at 1%, that is a much larger pace of growth than these other areas. Plus, average hourly earnings are actually up 7.4%, with the state level being up 4.5%, and nationally only 3.8% increase. Now, do I think that this is the rate that everybody needs to keep up with the increased cost of living that is affecting everybody in the country? No, but this is double what we're seeing on a national level, so why wouldn't this help people in a much more affordable market like San Antonio? The third big reason is the lifestyle draw. When it comes to looking at affordable housing in places that people can afford to live, lifestyle is a big factor that people consider, but maybe not as much as they should. Obviously, when you look at San Antonio, much more affordable than places like Austin or Dallas, and even so more affordable than places like Houston. You also have the culture of San Antonio. You have the Pearl District, you have the Riverwalk downtown, you have the San Antonio Missions, the Spurs, and the culture that, the pride and joy of San Antonio. You've got, the potential expansions long term that San Antonio is eyeing to really grow that centerpiece of downtown. You have all kinds of stuff in addition to, the rich Hispanic culture that San Antonio obviously has that brings a lot of people here to visit and also makes them fall in love with the city because it is that slower, small town feel compared to the Austins, Dallases, and Houstons of the world, because there is no city quite like San Antonio that can say that. Although it is the 7th largest city in the country, it is significantly slower paced than all the other big major cities in Texas. Number 4 is the new development and infrastructure of San Antonio. So we've talked about it in a couple videos recently. There is $8 billion worth of projects lined up. These are the major projects. This isn't adding up all the little developments that are going around here and there. We're talking $2.5 billion for the airport expansion, which is going to dramatically affect the people that are coming in and coming out. You've got the $1.4 billion Loop 1604 expansion, which is going to dramatically make the travel around San Antonio a lot easier. Better roads mean people can live further out to get to their jobs, makes things a little bit easier to commute, and makes those areas a lot more appealing to more people who are having to drive farther distances to commute for work. Downtown is also seeing new changes with over $500 million in new projects. These range from towers getting remodeled to be residential buildings. These include new apartment complexes, new retail, new office developments, new high-rises, and then of course the $4 billion Project Marvel development plan that is in the very early stages still, but is going to completely transform the tourism, the appeal of San Antonio, what really makes San Antonio have its kind of tech culture. It's going to be a huge entertainment district. And number 5 is interest rates. So of course, when it comes to buying a house, the interest rate is probably one of the most important factors. Although there are a ton of people out there now who are able to pay cash for their houses because they have paid off those homes, they're just turning around selling them and then coming to an affordable place like San Antonio and buying them. When it comes to interest rates themselves though, same thing. Whenever you're starting off, first-time home buyers, or those that are putting 20% down, VA buyers that are moving here and being PCS for military, doing those VA loans. I've got VA buyers right now that are getting 5% loans. New construction, you can get as low as like 4.5% to 5% loans. I've got even some conventional buyers right now approved for 5.75%. So those 6.5%, 7% rates that have hindered people for a long time are starting to trickle down, and this is starting to increase the demand in this market, and that is going to just continue to increase the appeal and the amount of buyers that are moving to a place that is as affordable as San Antonio. Another thing that is also huge when it comes to interest rates is that a lot of people that do have a little bit of cash to put down, the assumable loans are being a big thing here. So especially if you're a VA buyer or even just looking for a house that you can do an assumable loan on, I've had people get as low as 2% interest rates on an assumable loan. You come in, you pay the difference in that equity from what the seller is selling their house for versus what they owe on the house, and you take over those payments so that you continue to start making that lower payment at that lower interest rate. So when you combine lower interest rates, a pretty low price of living, here in San Antonio, and housing price, and dramatic infrastructure growth, this is kind of a sweet spot for dramatic and explosive growth overall. Now, without just getting into all these positives and thinking that it is automatically going to happen and everything's going to just go crazy again, which I'm guaranteeing that it's not. I guarantee that I don't know everything. So let's talk about all the potential negatives that could come into play and slow pricing growth, or even decrease prices. Interest rates could go back up. Like I told you, they went down to 6.15 on a national level and immediately up to 6.35. Stuff like that can happen drastically. If we see some very, very strong economic indicators, that is the direct correlation to higher interest rates. Now, if the economy is starting to soften a little bit, we're starting to see some lower job numbers, maybe some job growth decreases and some unemployment numbers start to tick up. That's when interest rates start to go down a little bit. Now, of course, the next thing In Texas, as most of you guys know, we do not have the lowest property taxes. In fact, it is probably one of the big negatives. And if I had to pick one giant negative for the entire state of Texas, it's property taxes. Now, rising property taxes can definitely limit the amount of people that are coming here. You're going to look at a $400,000 house. What if you got to pay $10,000 a year in property taxes? Can you afford that? Is that going to dramatically affect your decisions of coming here? Because, $10,000 a year is not cheap. And some of those houses, especially if you get up that $500,000 range in some of those higher tax rate areas that have those mud taxes in that 2.3 to 2.5% range, $500,000. Okay, now we're looking at $12,000, $14,000, maybe $15,000 in property taxes. That is not the case across the board. There are lots of areas that have much lower property tax rates around San Antonio, some with, 1.3, 1.5, 1.7. That's kind of the normal. So, we can have those conversations and make sure we're avoiding those high property taxes, but that is definitely something that is going to keep people from moving here. In addition to property taxes, the insurance increases that are happening could definitely affect people. I mean, in my personal house that I've owned for 3 years, my homeowner's insurance have gone up by over 75% just in 3 years. So if you are buying this house and you are getting your insurance and you are expecting, okay, I'm only going to pay $1,000 a year for my insurance, just got this brand new home. That's what they're quoting me. Outstanding. Think twice, because now, that's my situation. Now I'm paying $2,500 a year. So we've increased another $100, $200 a month. Just from that insurance. And so that can drastically keep people from, buying houses if they can't afford the insurance. Another big thing, and a lot of you guys in the comments talk about it a lot, so continue those conversations, is the infrastructure strain. So San Antonio, with our water issues and traffic and overall congestion of more and more people moving here, is going to create headaches for the people that are already living here. And maybe people are not going to want to deal with that anymore, are going to move elsewhere. Now, that's a kind of extreme situation because, like I said, I don't see any areas around Texas especially that are anywhere close to being as good as San Antonio compared to like the traffic and everything else. But when it comes to overall, especially the water issues, that's a big one, especially up on the north side. All those neighborhoods that are feeding from Canyon Lake, and they keep building neighborhoods in these areas that have low water, issues. That's going to be a big problem in the long term. And of course, on the large scale, you do have national economic issues. If there's mass layoffs, especially with military or government, if tourism industry dries up, San Antonio has a big tourism industry, that's going to affect San Antonio. Now, what I can say is that you typically don't see mass layoffs in the military of all places. Military education and healthcare are typically pretty stable. So even back in 2008, when you had the massive layoffs and, the huge housing crash that happened, San Antonio was relatively flat. They really didn't decrease at all on the prices. The number of sales went down drastically, but overall the prices stayed relatively flat and then immediately started going back up at around 2010 to 2011. So seeing the resilience during one of the worst economic periods in the United States history bodes well for if there are any national economic crises that come up, that San Antonio will stay resilient for that as well. So here's the bottom line, y'all. This is where I want y'all to pay close attention, because we're going to get really into the specifics of what this means for buyers long term and into the coming years. So like I mentioned, a lot of this that we're seeing in San Antonio is very, very dramatically different from one neighborhood to the next. We're in what I would call a correction phase from the pandemic boom to now. We've had an overall pretty flat market and housing prices growth, but areas like Alamo Heights have been down in double digits. You've got places like Stone Oak that are kind of mixed back and forth. You've got places like the far west side that are dramatically down, and you've got builders that are selling houses at a $100,000 to $200,000 discount compared to what they were selling them at before. And some numbers, even for places like Cibolo, actually are, which has a median price point of $325,000, right there, even with San Antonio, are actually seeing a price decrease of almost 10% from last year, which is pretty crazy. Now, in 2026, we're going to start seeing a lot of these major projects start to be completed. That JCB manufacturing plant down on the south side is going to add over 1,500 jobs. That's going to be done by next year. So those jobs are then going to come in, and they're going to start buying houses out there in different areas. That's going to help people potentially open up a little bit more. So the problem that can always come up, and this is what worries me the most with buyers who are sitting around waiting, and it's one of those things where it's like stocks, right? If you're playing the long-term game, you're going to be in a lot better situation than if you're trying to buy a house and sell it for a major profit in 2 years. It hardly ever works. It's like gambling, right? But use this as an example. In 2015, if you were to buy a $310,000 house since that time, even after, the pandemic and everything else, that same $310,000 house 10 years ago is now worth $577,000, 86% increase over that 10-year period. We've now been 3 years of higher interest rates. Have you been waiting those 3 years? And I'm never telling anybody that now is the perfect time to buy. I'm not one of those real estate agents that does that. I personally think that if it is your time to buy and you are comfortable with it and you're financially able to do it and feel that you are able to do it comfortably at a comfortable level, then I recommend it. But if you're unsure, maybe you should start looking into the numbers a little bit more and see what it's actually costed you over the last 3 years of waiting. Now, I'm not saying that this exact same situation is going to play out over the next 10 years. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't actually know. But right now, there are houses that are decent starter homes that you can find in areas that are up and coming. You look at Converse, you look at the south side over at Vita, and then near Texas A&M San Antonio. You look at places like New Braunfels and Seguin, even places out on the west side going out towards Cashville. All these places that have super affordable neighborhoods that have $250,000 homes that you can buy, and start putting your money into an investment like a house. You gotta live somewhere. Might as well invest in yourself with that house. So by 2030, if we even see half of the levels of the appreciation that areas like Austin or that we saw over the last 10 years, I mean, that $250,000 super affordable house right now could be worth $350,000+ in the next 5 years. And this does bring me to something that I have seen happen quite a bit recently. Right now, we're at a 50% higher level of inventory than we saw, right at the pandemic, right at the start of the pandemic. This is equating to a lot more leverage for buyers. We're seeing a lot of people that have bought houses and unfortunately are being relocated, or, they're having to move for family reasons, and they're having to sell their house at a technical loss. So what I'm saying is this window doesn't last forever, and that window is going to continue to shrink as overall price growth happens and more people start to come here. So you can always wait for the perfect time. I don't think the perfect time ever comes. I would love to wait for the perfect time and where I can buy the house that I'm in right now for $100,000. It's not going to happen, right? There's so many different factors that come into play with buying a house, and in my opinion, it's more about what is right for your lifestyle and less about timing the market perfectly. And when those 5 major factors that I talked about start to kick in, you're going to see that buyer's market, or what's close to a buyer's market, completely be eliminated, and it's going to be a lot more competitive to get that house that you want. So here's my advice, personally, from a real estate agent that's lived here in San Antonio my entire life and has seen this city grow and grow and grow for the last 40 to 50 years. It's never going to stop. Look at where the path of development is. If you were wanting to buy a house right now, but maybe you're not quite in the financial, ability to buy something that is perfect for you, maybe you have a little bit of cash, maybe look at something that can be a good long-term investment in the path of development. Look at places like Seguin and New Braunfels. Everything's growing out towards Austin, right? Look at the far west side where everything is growing out that direction. Look in places where maybe you can get one of those assumable loans, right? And get a house at a super low interest rate that you can live in for a few years and get a lower payment by spending a little bit extra out of pocket to cover that difference between the price and what the mortgage is on that current home. Look at new construction and get some of those incentives, to where maybe if you're a VA buyer, you don't have to spend any money at all to buy a house, and then you can live in it for 5 to 10 years, let it pay off itself, and then upgrade to that bigger house down the road. There's all kinds of different things. Even look at some of these just super affordable areas that have a ton of new construction going in, Converse and Southside, right? Like, these areas are prone for development because they're the last places that have a little bit more affordable land to be developed for these big developers, right? But most importantly, do not try to time this perfectly. Like I said, it is impossible to do that. Look at the growth of San Antonio, see the thousands of jobs, the billions of dollars that are going to be invested here, and consider what that means for the long term. This market in San Antonio is not going to last forever. We're kind of at a crossroads. We're hitting those developments that are starting to come in the next 12 months. In the next 5 years or so, San Antonio is going to be completely unrecognizable. So let's find out exactly what San Antonio is going to be like. And, you and I are just along for the ride. We'll see what happens, and we'll do our best to enjoy the ride while we can. And again, guys, if you have any questions whatsoever, whether you're looking to move here in 2 days or 2 years, schedule a call down at that link in the description, that Calendly link that gets directly to me. You can also email me at that email in the description below. Call, text, or email, whatever works best for you guys. I'm an open book and would love to help you guys out with whatever you need when it comes to considering moving or buying or even selling in San Antonio if you're already living here and want to maybe jump up to that next house that is that next level for you. But here's the deal. You always need to know about the top neighborhoods and the top suburb areas that people are looking to move to in San Antonio. So check out this video right here. It is a great example of that. And until the next one, guys, we'll see you there.